solar farms and any other technology, that it's important that the time is spent on the front end to be as thorough as you can in the design, the cost estimation, and allowing for appropriate contingencies to be built into the overall cost model, because there will be unexpected changes that are required. No different than building your home. Same idea.
Thank you. That's my time.
Mr. Kuhn, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, there is a difference in building your home. There's no plutonium in your home that you have to provide layers of safety around to protect the public. That's a big difference. But I just wanted to start off with a report that was just released today by the engineers at Canada's Pembina Institute. It's quite relevant to our region. It's entitled Towards a Clean Atlantic Grid, Clean Energy Technologies for Reliable, Affordable Electricity Generation in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. They looked at using the kind of portfolios I was talking about earlier, combined hydro, wind, and solar with storage, demand response, and energy efficiency, and compared that portfolio against small nuclear reactors and actually natural gas. And they found in all cases that the renewable clean energy portfolio I described provide the same services to the grid as gas or nuclear reactors at a lower cost per unit of energy over the lifetime of those technologies. So this contradicts, doesn't it, what you said, which is we can't do this without small nuclear reactors. So can you explain how it's possible these engineers could model an energy future for New Brunswick that provides the energy needs we will have without using small nuclear reactors, which you say are essential?
So I have not seen the report, so I'll make that comment up front, so I can't speak to the specifics of the report. What I do know is that from a hydro, wind, solar perspective, and if you want to include battery storage along with that, or storage in general, not specific to batteries perhaps, is that we do have recent experience, we live it every day, of understanding what those resources can bring to the table. They absolutely are part of the future. Absolutely, no question. At the same time, when we look at hydro resources, I'm not sure where that new hydro resource exists, certainly in New Brunswick, or for that matter, in northeastern Canada. I do know that Lower Churchill is a potential for development in the future. I do know that perhaps there's maybe one or two other sites in Quebec that could be developed. But certainly the existing hydro that we have a very good understanding of what the water flows are and the capability of those systems moving forward likely to produce. As we can appreciate, a lot of that fuel in the hydro system in the form of water is frozen. It's frozen in the riverbanks, it's frozen all around us in the form of snow. So in the wintertime, when we need that energy, it is not there and available to the requirement that we need. Wind and solar, and I've spoken on that, I completely agree that they're part of the solution moving forward, but having sole dependency on that production during December, January, and February, and I've provided examples whereby not only unique to New Brunswick, but other jurisdictions in Canada see the exact same thing, that the production from those facilities is limited. Solar, as we can see during those January days, would have a production window probably between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Otherwise, we're moving into darker conditions. So again, it is part of the solution. Battery storage, very costly, as an example. The footprint associated with some of those technologies is another point of discussion, because land is not being, we have what we have, and we need to make sure we utilize it most efficiently. So the footprint associated with solar farms, with wind farms, and the impacts that that has on the local landscape is something that we need to be conscious of. Battery storage, if we stick with that, to meet the requirements on some of these colder days are not insignificant. It's acres and acres of batteries to help. And I don't believe, based on our understanding and where technology is today, that that will be the 100% solution. So I go back and say, we need all solutions. They all play a role in solving for net zero by 2035. And we need to make sure that we optimize those as we move forward. And it's not about one solution.
It's an exciting time, I imagine, for engineers who do energy modeling these days, looking into the future. And so there's lots of that going on, like the report I just mentioned, which is not one solution, but a portfolio of many solutions, excluding nuclear power. They took a least cost lens in their study and used the range of estimated costs from per power from small nuclear reactors in their analysis in terms of sensitivity, and still significantly this portfolio that includes hydro, wind, solar, storage, demand response was substantially cheaper and of course less risky. Let me ask you about the research reactor in Idaho that operated from the 1960s to the 1990s that ARC is looking at basing their technology on here. In that period, the heyday of nuclear power actually in the 60s and 70s, why was that research reactor never scaled up? Well, why was it never commercialized?
I would say that the nuclear sector, and I have to be mindful of my comments here, the nuclear sector in the US, served other purposes as well. And so that reactor was not one that was seen to supply the complete, I'll call it, ecosystem in the US. And as such, there was a focus on the current technologies with PWRs and BWRs, so pressurized water reactors and boiling water reactors, and the technology that is predominantly in the US was seen as that solution for the US at that time. Obviously, I wasn't involved specifically or in the US at that time to speak more informed about that, but certainly that was my understanding, that the technology that was adopted was able to meet the broader requirements of the US.
Well, wasn't one of those requirements a cost that the utilities could see they could afford? Because a lot of the work then in the heyday of nuclear power in 1960s, 1970s, it started out looking at small size reactors, but they realized they needed to get economies of scale in much larger reactors to be able to make the price of electricity at least tolerable for utilities to want to buy their products. Isn't that one of the things that happened in that period?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That the size of the reactors fed to or supported the economies of scale. Since that time, and exactly along the lines of what you're talking about, there's been significant advancements in wind. And the cost profile associated with wind, even in our experience, has dropped in half since what it would have been in the 2004 or 5 timeframe. Solar costs are coming down. So we recognize that because of those advancements in technology, that they can play a bigger role and ensure that we have diversity and alternatives moving forward. Energy efficiency is another great example that there's a big focus on energy efficiency initiatives in order to reduce our consumption and be conservative in what our needs are. Those weren't available in the 70s. It was about solving for the growth, the industrialization that was occurring to make sure that reliable energy sources were there. And the economies of scale spoke to that. We also recognize that when you put 1,000 megawatt facility, whether it's nuclear, coal, any other type of generation as a standalone system or standalone generating facility, that your requirements from a system reliability require you to back up or have sitting idle 1,000 megawatts in the event that that unit trips. So now you've got a very large other alternative or contingency that is sitting there in the event that that unit trips because you need to deliver or replace that electricity. The benefit of having smaller units, such as 100, 150, and perhaps 300, is now your contingency requirement has dropped from 1,000 or 700 megawatts down to 300 megawatts or 150. So your supporting investment has been greatly reduced as well. And so when we think about diversity of supply, having 3 units or 6 units that make up to 1,000 from an outage planning point of view, from a reliability point of view, is a much better situation than relying on one 1,000 megawatt unit. So there's economies of scale, yes, that come part of it, but also when you look at these new solutions and able to incorporate renewables, so that's the other factor, is that, you know, the technologies that we look at are able to integrate more renewables than the traditional nuclear design. The traditional nuclear facilities will operate at 100% output, and the best way to operate those units is to keep them at 100%. With a small modular reactor generation or advanced design, you're able to move those reactors around more easily. As a result of that, you can integrate more variable renewables such as wind and solar. So it does create that flexibility moving forward to ensure that we are making room for all technologies, and at the same time ensuring that reliability for our customers is top of mind.